Good day, everyone. HighRoad Solutions is pleased to present this online webinar entitled, I Love You, Lessons in Personal Branding. Our speaker for this presentation today is Suzanne Carawan. My name is Erica Bayshore, and I will be your moderator for today's seminar. Today's presentation will last approximately 60 minutes and include a specific question and answer period at the end of the session. You can ask questions via the web conference simply typing your question into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen and then clicking on the call-out button or hitting the enter on your keyboard. These instructions will be repeated later in the program. If you have any technical questions during the event, please email support@highroadsolution.com. Today's webinar is being recorded and all participant lines will be muted during the live program. Suzanne Carawan is an active participant, member, and volunteer. She is a member of the American Society of Association Executives and serves on their meetings and exposition council. Suzanne also serves on the advisory board of the Event Alley Show and is a member of several event industry associations, where she is a passionate advocate of event technology and marketing. With that, I would like to now turn the webinar over to Suzanne.
Hey, thanks, Erica, and thanks everybody for joining us today. We've got this is our last topic in a webinar series on kind of all things under the branding of love and how organizations and what tools and techniques you're using in today's world to help people to get to know you, to want to interact with you, and to help people to come your way. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but this kind of harkens back to a shift overall that's happened in marketing, where we've moved from mass marketing and just pushing out messages, kind of throwing darts out there, to really getting targeted and trying to delve down into a quality versus a quantity type of play. And this is now extended into the personal brand as well. And I do want to give a shout out to Lauren Longo. We created this webinar specifically for her and a couple other groups of young professionals out there who were asking us a really pointed question, which is it was assumed that they knew how to build a brand online because they were a young professional, but they weren't actually really aware of what to do with LinkedIn and things like that. And we've heard since then, in looking into this topic, to say, is this something that we should talk about? Many, many more people kind of started fessing up and saying they were social media shy and they wanted to do this, but they weren't sure where to start, or they felt weird about it, and all of those things. And so I just want to start in talking about personal branding, saying, yes, it's weird. Let's just get it on the table. It feels uncomfortable. Most of us feel very uncomfortable. There's a lot of generational differences in there as well, where many of us were raised to say, it's rude to talk about yourself, all of these things. But in fact, it is the reality of today. But there's some interesting ways we can do it, and I think that you can feel more comfortable. So we're going to start right now with some reality checks. So the first reality check, if you're saying, I like to put it this way, if you're saying to yourself, personal branding for me is either one, only for celebrities. I'm not LeBron James, I'm not Rihanna or something. You have to say, number one, it is for you. And then the second piece is you can say, well, I'm going to put it on the list. And the list is one of those things that all of us have. It's that bucket item of things you'd like to get to one day, you're interested in, but you're too caught up in the day-to-day operations of your life to really get there. And so I want to rip the Band-Aid on that one and say it's something we have to do sooner rather than later for most of us, if you haven't already started, or if you're new into your career. And we're going to keep this about the professional stuff today, but you could extend it. But if you're new to your career, because this is the reality of what's happening in today's world, when you're talking about being hired, or people have, how much can you expand or elevate your kind of net worth in terms of your worth to, let's say, a company or to an organization or a volunteer position, to a board, whatever the case may be, we have to start to assess that. And the reality is people do use that thing called the Google to actually put your name in and find out about you. And so we want to do a couple of things, the reality checks. And while I was putting this webinar together, I ran across an article from Demand Metric on their blog, and the URL is down there at the bottom. But I thought it was such a poignant little snippet to pull out. I did so, and I've highlighted the piece here that the author has put in. But So what they've done is they've looked at somebody's profile, and what that person had on their profile was results-driven strategic decision maker and visionary marketing executive with 18 years of experience for a global healthcare company. And like, isn't that buttoned up? Isn't that professional? That's very formal. It says what they do. But what their point is you go on to read that, assuming that's true, clearly all you understand now is about how to kind of talk about yourself in this very plastic, formal way, and that their whole point of the article is that basically you've just ruined your whole brand in less than 60 seconds. Because if you're truly a marketing executive, what you do is tell stories. And actually, in reality, the whole point of personal branding is it's just helping you to do a better job telling your unique story. I would also contend that marketing as a whole, whether you're talking about your personal brand or your product or your service or your annual event or your organization or your cause, all of it now is storytelling. And there's so much information out there talking about that shift. But, you know, people theoretically buy into it. Of course, the rub comes when you try to implement it as an organization. And you get all the, you guys know, you get all the pushback and all the reasons why you can't do it and it has to be this and the crisis for sending emails and the whole bit happens, and somehow the storytelling gets lost and you kind of go back to get down in the weeds and the tactics. But for your personal brand, you're not under any of those constraints, right? You don't have a board, and you might have a spouse. Maybe they operate like your board, but you don't have the constraints that you would have, let's say, within working with an association or a nonprofit or a tech company or what have you. You don't have any of those constraints. You get to decide what your brand is. You're going to know it best, and you have the ability then to tell your story. And so we're going to focus in on this whole bigger picture is what's your unique story, and what's your story today, and what you want your story to be, and what you want your story to be in the future, and looking at how you can have continuity through the ages, if you will. So even if you're starting out there, Lauren, and you're only less than a year into your career, you want to have some consistent kind of pillars of who you are that just don't change over the years. And some people call those values, and those are the values, but it's how now we can message those out. It becomes the personal branding aspect. So let's move on and talk about reality. So I was saying the reality check is that in today's world, people Google you, right? Or they put it in Bing, or they put in something, and they look across to see how you are. Who are you? What have you created? Or what kind of what's called a digital footprint? What kind of digital footprint do you have? And the assumption behind the scenes is that, now we're talking from an employment perspective, is that the higher up maybe you go in your career, the more exposure you have out to the market, the more opportunity you have to have a voice. This used to be the historical idea, right? That as you go rise up into a company, into the upper tiers, you have more opportunity to kind of create a portfolio of the work that you've done, and you have more public opportunities to speak and go out and be published in articles and whatnot. What's happened is that the internet, or social media really, has changed that kind of traditional mentality and now given everybody a voice. And so there's a perception that if you don't have that digital footprint, that there's something that you're just not out there, you're not engaged, you're not really into your career, you're not really into anything. It's like, who are you? You're not even on the map, right? So now I'm going to put a little caveat around that, being that obviously all of this depends on your job type that you're in, who you are, like what's going on in your world, whether how much you want to have exposure. But we're going to go with the kind of the common man, which is, it's okay, there's no reasons you couldn't have exposure, you're not going to be in jeopardy and things like that. So point being, you have to know that the first step is to go and Google yourself, okay, and you got to see what's there. So depending on what type of, course, job you're on, et cetera, it might depend on how much of a quote-unquote digital portfolio you need to show. But again, the good news is you don't have to wait. So no longer do you have to wait until you spend 15 years in a company before you can finally go out and get a speaking engagement. Nowadays, you can start to have your own voice and evidence that, what's called social proof, of kind of your existence by using social media well and creating your content, and we're going to talk about that. So before we do that, first reality check is Google yourself and see what comes up, and start looking at how you have to step out of yourself. You have to start always having this dual role of here's who I am, here's who I want to be in the future, and here's how people kind of perceive me. And you got to take this and you got to say, okay, do I even have now baseline as to what's out there on the web about me? And also from a reputation management standpoint, you want to make sure that what is out there is what you want to be, and then you need to rectify that if it's not. And we'll talk about that in a second. But Google yourself. So I didn't want to make anybody a guinea pig for my webinar here that, you know, would be embarrassing. So, of course, I did what, again, all good spouses do. I used my own husband and threw him out there because he's a classic example of a guy who should have more of a digital presence, but again, it's on the list for him. He doesn't really see why it's necessary and things like that. So I went ahead and I Googled John Carawan Jr. And just so you know, my husband says, because these generational things do matter, he's a hardcore, what's in the Generation X category. He's 42 years old. He is a financial economist, and he works. He's an expert in like mortgage-backed securities in multifamily housing, right? Which is like whatever that's about. But I think if you're in that field, that's pretty hot stuff. So point being, you Google him, and this is the extent of the John Carawan Jr. digital footprint, right? So we have his LinkedIn's there, cool, got some of those. We got some images in there, and then it goes into, by number 1, 2, 3, 4, it's already off of him, okay? So he basically has 3 postings. Now, as a rule of thumb, if you're really getting content, you're doing well, and this, by the way, this is all organic stuff. It's just organic search engine. I haven't paid to, you know, post anything. You want to have the first 2 pages of Google, page 1 and page 2. You should have a presence there. And I think that's a good rule of thumb for the first couple of years of your career. And kind of as you think about it, for each page thereafter, you want to have another page that you are taking up, like the first, you know, 10 pages. So if you're like at a director level, you're at the vice president level, et cetera, you want to see a good 10 pages worth of your stuff showing up so that you know, so people can get a sense of who you are, right? Because nowadays, again, on this other side, when hiring people or when thinking about partnering with people or even thinking about the buying process of, you know, who do I want to use as a vendor, using this methodology is something that more and more people are doing because they want to understand who it is, who are the people that are part of this kind of situation. People aren't going in blind kind of like how they used to. Things are really kind of merging back to, I think, back to when they were before probably mass manufacturing came, where things are coming back to being on a handshake. It's the who you know thing. It's really about who's at the local store, you know, and who you trust, and it's the relationship piece that's becoming more important than, you know, whatever it might be, the commoditized technology, the product or service, the fact that you have an annual event. That's not becoming the key. It's not even the membership of an association. The key is the relationship, right? That's what they want to buy into. So membership now, the value proposition isn't like we have an event or we have a membership. The value is in that we have the relationship of people like you that we can help facilitate, right? That's a change even in the value prop that we're seeing happen within the association world. So also just, you know, things to note. I would point out if I was doing a personal branding exercise for John Carawan Jr. That's great. This is a picture of him. Here's some of his work of publications he's done. And then here's a picture of our son. Okay, so I want you to know, again, this is how Google works, that these things get pulled from all over the place, and doing a little periodic check on yourself to make sure that the things that are showing up is what you want is kind of a key thing. To that point, once you're in Google, don't just look at web, move over to the images tab. And here's what comes up on the images tab for my husband. So we have the couple of things that we just saw, but then we have this like crazy assortment of interesting things, including a handgun, and then all sorts of stuff with Martin Luther King, and then we've got all this protest stuff happening. And it's one of those things where you should just take a moment and try to backtrack and say, how did this come about? Are these the things that you want to be associated with? Because if you take a little bit of time, you can figure out how these things are interconnected. Maybe there was a keyword in that article. Maybe you've been tagged incorrectly in Facebook and things like that. And then you can kind of take measures if something's truly there that's offensive. And by the way, not just on the personal brand, but absolutely be doing this for your own association or your own organization, your own product, et cetera. It's just a little bit of the reputation management. But many of us forget about the images thing. But image is very, very powerful, okay, especially as we're growing more so. Then I moved over to news, and you can see the only article that came up with something about Pete Seeger's protest, and that clearly has nothing to do with a financial economist in mortgage-backed housing securities. So probably here it's like he doesn't exist, and none of his, so that should be a key to say to you, well, if he's published work out there and it's not showing up, then maybe, again, we need to look at our metadata, and maybe we don't have tags in place. Maybe there's other things we can do that our work is not getting indexed. And so that's another thing to start looking into some of the best ways to do search engine kind of optimization with your own content. And while people talk about that all the time, the reality is most of us don't feel ashamed if you are a person in your organization and you're uploading stuff to YouTube, or you're putting stuff into SlideShare, or you're posting even onto a web page on your website, and you skip over really writing a really good description, you skip over the metadata, you skip over the tagging. Most people do it because why? We're pressed for time. But in reality, that is such valuable material if you can write it from scratch. And don't just do the cut and paste thing across the board. Really craft it, because that organic richness of those descriptions is what things like Google and Bing and the search engines absolutely love, and they start to really value much higher in today's algorithm. Okay, so then moving over to videos, of course. Now, videos, again, is interesting. So if I'm looking at being a potential employer or potential partner or hiring John Carawan, I would find it very interesting that the top videos that come up are all about some kid at Junior Olympics and the Tennessee series Because of You, and it's about some sort of other protest movement. Now, this can be good or bad. These are the types of personal branding decisions you're going to have to start making about yourself, about how do you want to showcase yourself. In today's world, it is a little weird. It's not recommended, let me put it that way. If you only show things that are totally professional, and again, you're like plastic and you're looking like, you're only able to, talk from this like very PR standpoint. It comes across as very stymied. It comes across as very, just not very genuine. It's not very authentic, because people do have lives outside of their professional. So you want this blend of professional and personal. And so you have to then make decisions like how much do you expose your kids, like this happens to their child. So somebody might say, well, that's really interesting. That's kind of fascinating that there's this other aspect. Or they might say, oh, I don't know, we don't want anything to do with that. So those are the types of decisions you need to make, right? Just like, by the way, as a side note, there's a lot of hype now on personal branding of your own children, okay? Because so many things nowadays are about having this digital footprint, and there's a lot of kids who are, again, think about the NFL Combine is going on right now, or just finished. The NBA draft is coming up, and people are getting recruited earlier and earlier, and getting sponsorships and getting scholarships earlier and earlier and earlier. So there becomes a natural pressure for your kid to have a digital footprint. And those questions of when's that appropriate, what can we do about that, how do you build out a personal brand, how do you make sure that you're going to maintain that. Just I wanted to throw that out there because it's becoming important even for kids to have this personal brand. And I'll make a note of this one too. This isn't going to go away. The internet's not going away. So if you haven't done it, you might want to buy the URL of your own family name, your kids' names, those types of things, okay? Because that way you get to control that reputation management part, and you don't have to worry about it in the future. I know it seems maybe a little out there, but it's a reality that people don't think about. You don't want somebody else, having some bullying thing happen, and they go and they take over and they start talking about your kids. You also want to make sure you're looking at, again, those that you love and kind of that personal branding reputation management piece. Okay, point being, I could go on and on and on with this little exercise. I could go into Pinterest. I could go over to YouTube and look at within there. I can go into all these different places and decide how much of a digital footprint do I have. Now, most of us, the reason we're on here is because we're asking ourselves, we don't have one yet, right? Or do we have the right one? Or what can we do now? So let's now stop and go through the 10 things of how really to build kind of this digital footprint and your personal brand. And again, in today's world, it doesn't have to be digital, but it's the cheapest fastest way to do it. And that's why brands and organizations are, again, shifting their overall marketing mix and seeing more and more and more digital come in and less of the whatever it might be, like direct mail or, really, and they're even changing up their live events because it's such a expensive and lengthy and time-consuming proposition. Or what they're doing is they just have to expand, and that's the hard part, right? Because digital marketing, again, you need to usually expand. You either have to get rid of something or expand the budget. There's just no two way about it because it's a whole additive piece. So that's it. So we have to ask ourselves, okay, what can we do now? We're going to focus mostly on the digital aspect of getting out the message as our ability to distribute our message, but let's go ahead and step through these 10 things. So the first thing is we need to figure out our essence, your individual essence, right? And so I'm showing you fragrance because it's that, what that specific thing is there that is your little blend that's unique to you that people would say, oh, that's so and so. Now this is the hardest part. If you skip to just having a blog and getting on Twitter and being on Facebook or what have you, and you don't understand your essence, you don't have your kind of a strategy together about yourself, you don't have your brand strategy, what happens is you fire off like 3 or 4 or 7 blogs and you're like, damn, you're thinking, I'm killing it. And then all of a sudden, like about blog number 8, you're like, I feel like I just ran out of stuff to talk about. Happens all the time. You're uncomfortable with it. You're not sure, what, where else to go, or you kind of say to yourself, I don't even know where to start. I don't know what I talk about. Who cares what I'm doing? You have all those things going on. It's because you're focusing on the execution part of it and not on the essence part. And once you figure out your essence, the content and the ideas and all of that just flows. Okay, so let's go through what in the heck this means. So essence. Again, it's the kind of what's the piece in there that really makes you you. And you're going to have to strip away a lot of stuff. And it takes a little bit of time. So go to the whiteboard. If somebody said, what are the elements of you, you probably will throw out stuff like where you live, who you're married to, who you're connected to, who your friends are, who's your partner, what title you have in the job world, what clubs you belong to, right? What causes you support, what channels of TV you like, what are your favorite magazines, who are your favorite superstars, who are your favorite sports teams, what's your favorite dog that you own, all those things, like you throw all that up there. And that's good because you got to get it out. But then you have to kind of step back and you have to say, wait a minute, I'm looking for qualities, not things about me, right? These aren't kind of resume bullet points. These are qualities about me. And that quality stuff is what people are trying to get to. That's the essence of those stories. They're trying to understand who you are and kind of what you stand for, okay? And the reason that's important is because if you just put out all those bullet points and it reads like a resume, right, what it comes across as is, again, being that very political, PR, plastic kind of person, so you don't really get an understanding. So like back to our first slide, that's great. You're a visionary marketing executive with 18 years of global experience, but like maybe you're a total jerk. We're trying to understand, that doesn't tell us kind of who you are as a person. It doesn't give us a sense of, maybe you have a very caustic personality, but you have a heart of gold. Like, we're trying to understand that type of stuff, right? Like, are you going to be the person that placates the organization? Are you going to be the person who stirs it up and keeps people on their toes? Like, you have to have that combination, because when people are trying to either do business with you or partner or hire you or fall in love with you or become a friend to you or be a colleague or just be a peer out there, that's actually what they're trying to figure out, right? That's what they want to know, is that piece of it. They want to know your expertise areas and whatnot, but they want to know kind of, how you roll, what makes you tick. And so the easiest way to kind of say that is if you ask the question, if you can fill in the blank with your name there, if some situation was to happen or some quality was to happen out there in the world, and somebody said, oh, that's so whatever, that's so, Jeff, that's so Suzanne, that's so Dave. If you can do that, then that's kind of that's an indicator as to that's something about your essence, okay? All right, we're going to circle back to that. The next thing to do is to identify, again, go to the whiteboard, use, a journal that you love. If you're like a writer and you like the paper pen aspect, put on your iPad, whatever, and start making a list as to your domain areas of expertise, or the domain areas that also maybe you wouldn't consider yourself an expert, because again, for many of us, depending on when we were raised and the culture we came from and whatnot, we shy away from like self-proclaimed expertise. We're like, oh, I'm not an expert unless I have a PhD and I have 35,000 years of experience and things like that. So forget that stuff for a second. Get back down to your domain area of things you know well, right, and things that you truly love. And so you want to really find that, because if you can unlock those two combinations of things you know and things you love, and hey, if you're the lucky person out there where those things are the same, they're one and the same, that you're actually doing what you love and what you're truly passionate about, that number one, you're very lucky and you're very blessed, and that those ideas will flow. You will never run out of content or ideas or things to do or projects to make or areas to research if you're focused in on something you truly love. And the other thing is you're not going to run out of energy. You run out of all those things when you're trying to produce work in an area that you're truly not really that interested in, et cetera. And that might be something like you have great expertise in this particular area, but you've just been doing it for years. It's not necessarily something you truly love. Okay, so it doesn't matter. You can take both of those things, and they can still do something great for your personal brand. But it's good for you to know. Ideally, what people perceive about you and what you are doing and creating would be the one and the same. Then you're going to ask yourself, where can I really add value? Okay, so if I have a domain expertise of this set of knowledge, and I really love, this particular thing, how do I put those together, and who can I help, and how can I add value to helping them? Okay, and the whole idea behind personal branding and getting your story out is that you're not standing on the street corner beating your breath, telling people just how great you are to tell a story. You're doing it underlying with this premise for doing good out there in the world. Okay, so then the easiest way then to say what's your domain area is to answer this question to yourself. And you can write this question down. It seems, I know, a little silly, but these things work like a charm. And you can come back to them. And I just put these questions down in a book so you can say over time, because these are the things that are going to be consistent about you over time. So if somebody says, if someone has a question on this topic or this thing, I'm their go-to person, right? Like one of my personal things for Suzanne Carawan is if you have a question on youth sports and lacrosse from the start of that up until age 10, I'm your go-to person. Right? Beyond that, I've never experienced it. I don't know. But you have to be able to say, okay, if somebody has a question on brand marketing in a B2B situation, I'm your person. Okay, I can answer all of those questions probably. Okay, or I'm pretty close to it. So thinking about those things in that situation helps you to understand who you are and then who you want to be. All right? Number three. Number three is a very uncomfortable one for most of us. Unless you feel like you absolutely love everything about your physical appearance, which is, not most humans. Most of us have a list, again, of things we want to improve and change. This is an uncomfortable part of the personal branding. So think about all the shows you see where they come in and they're doing makeovers, or they're coming in and they're ripping through your closet and they're saying, this is not you, you got to get rid of this, et cetera, et cetera. This is kind of that portion of the personal brand project. So this is when you look and you self-assess your aesthetic. So that is how do I actually look? How does my appearance look? And is this what I want people to believe? So you start to say, is this the reality? Are you really seeing yourself the way that other people see you? Most of us shy away. Most of us walk by mirrors, and they do studies on this, and don't actually look fully into it, and especially maybe as people get older and things like that. So there's all these things that come into it. And this is a definite rip the Band-Aid part. So you have to say, okay, am I realistic? Okay, so, and then because the key is you want to say, do you accept it? And that, is this what you want? If it's what you want, awesome. You're great. Now you just need to be really empowered with it and talk to people about it. But people are going to, this part of personal branding, it's like first impressions, they are going to make judgments, they are going to assess you, they are going to categorize you. This is the reality of usually human behavior. Okay? So the things that I also want you to take away about your personal brand that goes beyond just physical characteristics, right? How tall you are, your weight, your skin tone, whatever it might be. I want you to also focus in on a really key one, which is energy. And a lot of people don't think about energy and how important it is as an aesthetic, but it's incredibly important, and because it helps you to optimize your beauty. And you might say, wow, this seems so far afield from this idea, but let me put it from this perspective. Think about people, and maybe it's yourself, maybe gone through this, but think about people, the difference if you've ever seen them when they've fallen in love recently, and then if you've ever seen them when they've broken up with somebody or been heartbroken. The difference in somebody's physical beauty is absolutely tangible, right? So if you are alive, if you are radiating energy, you're interested, your eyes are up, you're smiling, all of that, that energy comes out, and absolutely, it's probably actually the first thing that people are able to experience. There's a lot of science going on right now where people are realizing that we're putting out those pheromones, we're putting out that energy, we're radiating that stuff, and that's becoming a big piece of who's attracted, who has charisma, who doesn't, and that type of stuff. And so people are working on how do I unblock that energy. We all have that within us, but we do get blocked over time. If you go in and you look at a group of second graders, right, and they're so open and their faces are open and they're lovely and they're just radiating energy and joy, all of us are kind of meant to be there, but over time, right, that kind of, unfortunately, for most of us, that kind of gets blocked and it goes away and it dissipates, etc. But we got to find a way to get that back, and that's part of your personal brand mission, is to find out whatever you're doing or topics you're interested in or areas, what allows you, when do you light up, right? When do you light up and then you can talk all day about that, etc. And that kind of comes to that last piece of aesthetic, which is kind of this idea of, are you working from a place of light or happiness or a higher level? And again, that's out there too, but think about it with the energy. Because if you really believe in the cause, think about fundraising. If you believe in that cause, I mean, you believe it, and you're out there and you're talking to people, it becomes very compelling for them to also believe it. It's very hard for them not to kind of fall in love with your cause if you yourself are in love with it. There's a commercial out there, if anybody out there is a sports fan, where Blake Griffin, the basketball player, is talking about his kind of road to being a professional player. And he says, one of my coaches once told me, you have to fall in love with being great. Okay, it's the same idea. If you can love that process and get to a higher level of what you're doing, and not get bogged down in dealing with the logistics and the tactics and dealing with the board and trying to make everybody happy and trying to get all these tactical things done. You can always keep that higher place in mind. That energy will radiate, and you will still be able to be beautiful in your process, and you'll be far more successful. At the end of the day, that's the purpose of personal branding. All right. So having said that, now that we're in that kind of more esoteric place, we want to say, where do you want to be? What are you envisioning? Now, if you are exactly where you want to be right now, then I'd say just start creating content like crazy and start telling people, one, how you got there. Give us the secret sauce, please. Tell us how we can do that, etc. But for most of us, you're going to say, where do I want to be in so many years? And you want to ask yourself these questions. What do I want people saying about me? What is a deal breaker? Somebody says, well, she's a little, like for me personally, one of my good friends is, I think out there, Dave Martin would say, bull in a china shop might start to get to where I am. But, if people are saying that about me, you have to be okay with that. I'm okay about that. I laugh about it, because that is part of me, because there's other pieces too. But you have to say, or what people are saying about you, are you okay with it? Is there things you want them to say? If they're saying it in public, and do you know? That's the other piece of it. And you also, I think, at the end have to say, at the end of your life, if someone's giving their eulogy about you, what are they saying? And is it what you want people to say? And that's when you start going down this path of looking between what you are today and what you want to be in the future. After we do this, we can return to the first slide, which is the essence. Now we've probably given a lot more fodder for us to think about what makes us you, and going through all these pieces we said. And then what you want to do is you want to identify your deal breakers, right? Like you want to say, If I was in this situation and this happened, I would say, no, you just hit one of my boundaries. Like, I'm not doing that. That's unethical for me. That's not who I am. I can't stand by that. I can't support that. That's absolutely opposed to who I am as a person, as a human. Okay? So we want to, you want to identify those deal breakers and so that you know who they are, because that's part of your essence. And in doing that, if you find that hard to kind of get your head around, you can say, when are you going to fight somebody? When are you going to fight? Like if something comes up, you're like, whoa, I'm out of here. I have a total aversion to this topic. Don't ever want to be in a conversation taught with this one. You're out of there. That's good to know. What are the things that make you laugh? What are the things that make you cry, right? And then also a key one, when do you share? As a side note, if you're in an association, marketing, or a nonprofit role, a great question to ask members is this: when are you compelled to share our material? When are you compelled? What makes you want to share? Because you want to find out, or you could say, are you likely to share stuff? Do you share? Are you a sharer? You know, if you see an article, will you pass it along? Being able to identify those people in your membership population can have huge effects for your own content marketing and your own branding of the organization. Because there's only, not everybody else in the world is a sharer, right? So we need to find the sharer. So if you want to say what makes you share, when do you share, et cetera, that's important to know for your essence. Maybe you don't share. Maybe that's just not who you are. So that's also part of your essence. So we need to know that. Then we're going to do our pivotal self-check. We're going to look in the mirror and we're going to say, here's what I wrote down, you know, and it's not matching up for what I want my brand to be, right? So I have to do that kind of, here I am today, here's what I want to be in the future, here's what I want people saying about me, and then we have to say, what do we have to do to rectify that, okay? We're going to do that. That's also a very uncomfortable, it's right up there with the aesthetic. It's very uncomfortable usually for most people to do that self-check, but if you can take out the emotion and just say, it is what it is, here's where we are today, and here's where we have to grow. We can't be upset that we haven't achieved, you know, nirvana. We just have to say, here's where we are, and what can we do, right? 2 questions always. Ask yourself every day. What did I do right? What could I do to improve? And there's nothing else. You know, if there's no what did I do wrong? What did I do right? What can I improve? And we move on. That's our self-check. Then we're into building our personal portfolio, okay? So the personal portfolio is, again, mostly digital, but it's going to be all the tools that you can pull out that are available to you today for you to distribute your content so we can allow people to have that social proof, to be able to understand us and understand our thought patterns and who this will be. Okay. So by the way, just as we there's so many more of these. I could, you know, there's so many tools out there now in the social realm. If you're not familiar with any of these, give us a shout after this and we can go through it, and we can maybe even do some deep dives later on. But just keep in mind, the only one I think might be totally surprising is Quora. That's kind of like an Ask the Expert kind of online tool, because that could be, if you really have a domain expertise in a specific area, that could be a very powerful forum for you. Okay. So finally, or we're finally into now the part of the creating content. So in this kind of piece on deciding, you know, where we're going to put the content, the distribution channels, now we actually have to create the content to push out there, right? So think of it like this. In email marketing, your distribution channel is the actual product you use, the platform you use to push messages. You have to actually, that doesn't get you anything unless you have really great content to put into that to send out, right? So one is distribution, one is content. So now we're going to say, what kind of content can you create today? So for Lauren, who's a year into her career, she might say, well, I haven't gone out on some speaking tour. I don't have presentations. You know, I haven't written books, et cetera, et cetera. But she could start taking photos today and start making a whole Pinterest board. She could start doing videos today. She could certainly start tweeting. She could start commenting on conversations. She could start writing her own blog. There's all sorts of stuff, again, that you can start doing. And what are you going to write about? What are you going to talk about? You're going to do the thing that is that intersection of where you have true interest and also your domain expertise, or where you're going to develop domain expertise, okay? So maybe you're new in your career. You've been put into the fundraising arm, or you're in government relations. So right now you're going to have the opportunity in that job to create domain expertise in that area. So take advantage of it. Go for it, right? And then there are later questions of how you blend maybe personal and professional, but later webinar for sure. So we're going to go ahead and create this content. And then I just wanted to throw out some cool new tools that are out there for creating content. You might say, well, I don't know that I really have great tools out there to do this. There's a lot of tools out there now where you can create really professional looking like ebooks or videos, or there's some infographics software out there too. So you can look just like the other professionals, put your own piece on it. So I just thought I'd put those out there. And also Google Hangouts is a great way to just get exposure to how people are today. You know, so you can allow people to come and just kind of hang out with you and get to know you. Or you could show up to other people's Google Hangouts and get exposure that way. So pick a Google Hangout or pick a tweet chat or something in an area that you have passion for or you want domain expertise and start participating. Great way to get the exposure, great way for you to develop content in a natural setting because it's in a dialogue type of setting. All right. Next, you're going to go ahead and you're going to create a content plan. So the key here is you're going to have to decide you're going to set up your personal, what I'm calling home bases, like home base, like safe place. And so I say that because I might be out there tweeting or I might be posting or commenting on something. And ultimately, if I say something provocative or something that piques someone's interest, they're going to click on my name and they need to come back to some place, and that's usually the profile. So most of us blur through that profile, and there are so many profiles out there nowadays, I know. So you can either pick a set that you really want to invest in or try to populate all of them, but take some time to do some of them, is the bottom line. And probably it's LinkedIn if you're talking professional. But there are all those profiles. There's profiles in YouTube. There's profiles on, SlideShare, on and on. And this is for your organization as well. Make sure you take the time to really put in all the data, make the connections with your other social media channels, put in the photos, put in your profiles, picture, et cetera, et cetera. All that, again, is goodness for search engines. All helps you to get found, et cetera, and all things that help to give that social proof as to kind of who you are. So and get those done. Then you're going to decide your timing, okay? So here's what I say about timing. Either be totally predictable or not predictable at all, which is a little bit more authentic. So if it's a personal brand and your whole thing is going to be, you're kind of giving commentary as you are going through your own life and experiencing things, then that's not a predictable time frame for when you're going to post. If the whole point of your brand is that you're going to show how consistent you are, you're doing the tip of the day, you want everybody to start out because you believe in humanity, and every day at 6 a.m. sharp, you're going to put that out, then people are going to start to expect that. You're building a response to you, et cetera. And if you're going to set yourself up for that, you better be there at 6 a.m. Right? You got to make the commitment. You decide what's your brand and what you want to put out there. For most of us, timing though, it's better to not be predictable. What do I mean by that? Don't schedule a tweet every day at 3 o'clock. If it's supposed to look like a random thought tweet, but you've pre-written it 3 weeks in advance and it goes out at 3 o'clock, because that's just kind of cheap. It doesn't work very well. It seems fake. People, after a while, they start noticing patterns. We humans are very good at picking up on these patterns, especially in social media. So you need to just be aware of that. So pick a realistic schedule you can stick to for about 8 months. Like, think about you in 8 months. Because, again, most people come out of the gate really hot and heavy, post all this stuff, and then it falls off, okay? Pick tools you really enjoy. If you really love to pin photos in Pinterest, then go for Pinterest, because that's a great one. Or if you really just like to write, then write. But use a combination that feels good to you and that you can produce yourself, and it feels good. And then also start thinking about where you want to measure those pieces. Now, I pulled out a couple of slides, particularly on LinkedIn. This is for my friend Lauren out there, because she really was concerned that she has a profile, and I've heard this from a lot of new grads and a lot of new professionals, not really totally sure what to do with it. So I want to pull out a couple things, and you can do a self-check on your own profile. Number one, you got to fill out that profile. And I know they give you a little toolbar to make it seem like it's not a big deal, but you know what? It's a big deal. It's time-consuming. So take the time, find a little time, do a little bit each day, whatever it takes, and start filling in that profile and coming back to it and making sure you're updating it as well. And then really probably you need to upgrade to the premium model. I don't get paid by LinkedIn, but you probably do, because in the premium model you can find out who's actually looking at you. And that's important, because if your brand is going up, so are the people who are viewing your profile. Okay, and also you need to have a little gander as to who's looking at your profile, because that tells you maybe what jobs are interested in you, or what kind of areas of people are looking at you, and things like that. And go ahead and interconnect your other accounts. So if you had SlideShare, things like that. Then you need to focus on your image. And people laugh at this, but it goes back to aesthetics. The top thing that new professionals do, that where they go wrong on LinkedIn, is they put up, and this, I hate to pull out the females, but it's so true. You probably went to a wedding and you were a bridesmaid and you looked awesome and you had your makeup professionally done, and so you think that's the photo I'm going to take because I've looked the best there. And you put that one, and this is a true story, that's why I'm telling it. You put that one as your LinkedIn profile. Unfortunately, you forgot that maybe you had a strapless dress on or the spaghetti strap, and it looks like you don't have any clothes on, okay? You don't want to do that on LinkedIn. You want to look like you're fully clothed. And it's funny, but it happens all the time. So you want to make sure also you're not like looking like you're at a party. You're not, LinkedIn is not a place you want like an informal shot. You want a pretty much 3/4 or full face shot where it's mostly your, up close. You don't want the full body shot. You don't want even from mid-torso up. You really want a headshot, really from your shoulders up, and that's the profile picture that you want to have. So have your friend take that, and then also think about the background that you're in. You probably don't want to look like you have palm trees behind you or you're at the beach unless it's appropriate for what you're trying to do, etc. Change your descriptions periodically, right? Put in some stuff in there that is not just professional. So again, don't be plastic. 90% professional, 10% personal is a good rule of thumb. And then go ahead and start following companies and joining groups. And I say that because then when you look at the profile, you can start getting, again, a sense of who this person is. And go ahead and ask for endorsements and endorse other people, right? So kind of a do unto others. Now, there's a lot of controversy in the LinkedIn world about what endorsements mean and do they mean anything. And at the end of the day, they probably don't, but they certainly don't hurt. So keep that in mind. All right. Now, I pulled out, this is off of my profile on LinkedIn, and I'm just giving you a gander of if you belong to groups and organizations, that you can get a sense as to who you are. Now, if you're an association professional, I think, and you want to stay in the association field, I think incredibly important to make sure that you put in things like causes you care about, the opportunities you're looking for, and the organizations that you support. Because if you're a good member to another organization, you should probably be a good employee for that association, et cetera, right? But you can see that in just all the, and you can list a ton, it's like 50. So you can see in all the things that you support and the groups you belong to, you certainly get a sense as to how involved this person is, how connected they are, and what they're interested in doing. All right? And even with mine, you might look down and go, this is interesting. Like, she's got like stuff you'd expect in working with nonprofits, but then she has like all this sports stuff. Like that's kind of an interesting mix. Like, what's that about? And you want people asking questions about you. You want to say, that's interesting. I didn't expect to see that. So like, what's her deal? Okay? Now you want to define your connection strategy. And this is a controversial one, to say the least. So in all of this, the bottom line is you have to decide for yourself the value of how much you think it is for people to connect to you. Okay? So for example, there are people who on LinkedIn, they only want to accept connections for people that they really know and they really trust. And so therefore they have very few connections. Then there's people who are like, I want to be really inclusive, and as long as you don't seem to be doing anything for a bad cause, we can connect. That's completely up to you. And of course, that's how you're going to do for follows, for Twitter, your Facebook friends, etc. That's something you need, but have a plan ahead of time. So don't just say, yeah, connect, and then all of a sudden back up and say, oh, I don't want to do that. Okay, so think about it and say, how do I want to conduct that? And then do I want different profiles? Maybe I want a public profile that's professional for Facebook, and then a private one. All those decisions you need to decide what makes sense for you. And now you're off to the races. Now you can start posting and going, and you can create these conversations, etc. In saying that, I do want to say a couple of notes about the kind of content you post and your voice. So after we've done all this essence stuff, after we kind of understand our purpose, after we understand these pieces, you have to pick a voice that is going to resonate with who you really are as a human. What I mean is if you're not really the person who is like always a Pollyanna and super happy and all, a glitter and everything's like super positive. In reality, you do say snarky things, you maybe something, you're very pragmatic, or maybe you're even negative or whatever, then you want to make sure those things match, okay? And that's the reality, again, that we have to get into. So you have to pick a right voice that's going to maybe be the right combination, but it should be your voice. So however you're going to talk to people, that's how you should go ahead and put that out there. when you're doing your own content creation. So therefore have an opinion, right? But have business rationale. Like, don't be the person that just goes on a rant, just a rant. Like, again, that's not going to work. That's not going to engender anything. But what you do want to have is a business rationale behind it. So make sure you're also not just being the people pleaser and you never really say anything because it's just fluff. And it's, again, it's not going to help you to stand out. You got to stand for something nowadays in as a personal brand, right? Nobody wants to have the people who are just, all they do is play safe because they don't stand for anything. And then be accountable for what you do. So if you do make a misstep, be the first person to say, whoa, you know what, had a really bad day, that's not what I meant to say, etc. If you're upfront about it and you own it, there's a lot more latitude given in today's world. I'll say the same thing is true for communications as a whole, right? As a whole, now there's some caveats, but as a whole, that you can be more authentic and more real about it, and it's far more acceptable. I say that, and as proof of that, a lot of the keynote speakers now will come in and they will drop obscenities, and it's just part of their thing, and somehow that's become okay, because they own it and everybody knows it, and then they apologize in advance for it, et cetera. But meaning there's a lot more latitude now in today's society, in Western society, in how people present themselves. Okay? Last piece is measure. So many tools, all those things we talked about, Quora and SlideShare and Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and on and on and on, all have analytics behind them. You can steadily track to see how you're doing over time. And you want to see the hockey stick, which is basically you start low at baseline because you just started yourself measuring these things, and you're seeing it going up to an upward trajectory over time. Stick with it. Don't obsess and look every day at these analytics. It's kind of like, now there's two schools of thought of that. Maybe that will help get you leverage to help get you writing. But it's also maybe like getting on the scale every day. It might not work for you. Okay, so you might want to just assess yourself over time to see how you're doing and how your changes. You want to see, again, that upward trajectory. And if you work at this a little bit each day, you are going to see, or not even each day, if you just consistently work on this over time, you will see that happen. Okay? And finally, as a bonus, go ahead and make a study of who does it best, right? So why not learn from the masters? The celebrities out there, the big sports stars, the politicians, I hate to disillusion you, but let's rip the band-aid on this one. Most of the time, that's not really them talking. They have a whole team of people who are doing this for them. It could be them, but there's probably some other people in there but they have stuck to a brand strategy for that individual entity. And that's why everything seems consistent, and it doesn't look like all of a sudden somebody else in LeBron's, James's posse is posting, okay? But see how they're using that content. See how they're doing their timing, how the voice is getting across. Pick some people you're really interested in, and fields that you have genuine interest, and just see how they do it, and see what you can learn from that. And it's the same thing for organizations you might be of interest in, or magazines, or anything that you really have true passion about it, because then you can say, how can that's going to resonate. If it resonates with you, then you can take something away from that and have it resonate, other people resonate with that piece for you as well. So with that, we're going to leave it and say good luck to everybody. Keep in touch. Let me know how it goes. I take this type of work all the time, and we're always happy to talk to you about it. And of course, we do this for organizations as well, but just putting that out there to have fun with it too. I think it's important. Don't take it too seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously, because again, that tends to become a little bit plastic. So, be able to roll with the punches, be able to laugh at yourself, and have a lot of humor with who you are. With that, I'll wrap that up and take any questions should we have them.
Okay, let's get into our question and answer segment of this call. Your participation is key to the success of this call, or our webinars, I should say, so please don't be afraid to ask questions. If you can ask questions via the web conference system by simply typing your question into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen, and then clicking on the call out button, or hit enter on your keyboard. Okay, we have a question for you, Suzanne. How do you remove bad content? let me pull this up, bad content you get on search engines?
Really good question. Not easily is the answer to that. It depends. I mean, I think the key is, can you track down the source, right? And by the way, we didn't note this, but we should talk about at a subsequent webinar of how you can kind of make sure that you're having some sort of copyright control, some intellectual control over what else you're putting out there as well. But the key is if you can track down the source. And the steps would be that you track down the source, and then you put it down in writing, and you usually email or you would send them a direct mail piece explaining the situation, explaining why you feel like this has been abused in some way, and stating your case, and asking them to, if they would please do this, as a professional courtesy type of thing. Typically, people will do that. That tends to be kind of the rule of thumb I've certainly seen in working with organizations over my career. If, of course, that doesn't happen, then, and it is something that it could have some real consequences for you, then that is, of course, the place when you would start to seek legal advice and start to take legal action in doing that. And then typically they would send a letter, and then again, organizations would at that point say, I don't want to get into this. And again, of course, it depends on the severity, but that would be the typical path. So don't also feel like you can't, track down the source and email people and say, hey, and you do it in a professional way, but this is something that you have an issue with, and what could you do? And I'll add another thought on that. On personal branding, it's also about your network and all the other people who also kind of ascribe to who you are. And everybody has a network of kind of peers and colleagues out there that you're kind of like your people. So look at your people, because it's a great way to help your personal branding and your coming up to the top of search engines and things like that. And the person who says, who we need for that session or what have you, is to have those other people talking about you, and then, of course, you reciprocating and talking about them as well. And that becomes a very important part of how you actually build buzz about yourself.
Great, thank you. We have another question, and that is, what does Whitio and Glocksters do? I've never heard of them.
Oh, yeah. So Whitio is actually, I'm going to give a shout out to one of our awesome clients, Sigma Theta Tau International, the Honor Society of Nursing. They introduced me to this week. Their designer put together this great little video talking about their integration, just as a case back to Whitio. But she used a tool called Whitio. And Whitio basically is a drag and drop tool to allow you to create those little animated videos with sound and the whole bit that you see are so often used in content marketing. And you can create the little videos, all drag and drop. You don't need a designer, you don't need a developer, you don't need anybody to code it. It's either free or very low cost, and then you can publish it out into the web. So you could stick it onto Facebook, you can put it into YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. So great little tool. Glogster is something that usually shows up in the educational side of the house, the side of the world. So you see it a lot in elementary school up uses Glogster. But what it does is it's basically an amazing way to kind of create interactive posters. That's the best way to put it. So especially if you're a scientific society out there, you understand the concept of poster contests. This would be ability to put together kind of like an interactive infographic poster. So you can you pick a layout, and then you can pull in a video, you can pull in content, et cetera. And the idea is that you're trying to pull together disparate sources in an educational format that's fun, that allows people to learn a concept very quickly, and then also to be able to share it and comment on it.
Great, thanks. Okay, with that, I thank you for your participation in today's webinar, I Love You, Lessons in Personal Branding. A special thank you to our speaker, Suzanne Carawan. Please take a moment and provide us with some feedback by using a survey link in the important information box in the top right-hand corner. You may also email us at support@highroadsolution.com. Today's session was recorded. You will receive an email within the next few business days with a link to the webinar recording, as well as a written answers to any questions we were unable to answer today. Today's webinar is copyrighted by HighRoad Solution with all rights reserved. This concludes today's program. Thank you, and you may now disconnect.